Hi, guys, and welcome to the podcast. In this evening's podcast, what I'm going to do is we're going to talk about something a little bit different. We're going to change gears a little bit. So we spend a lot of time, or I do, giving out about carbohydrates and processed food. Tonight, I want to talk about something you can do if you have access to a gym that will reduce your chance of having a heart attack, dying from cancer, having dementia, Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's, dying from those by 50%, 50%. So I often start the talks. I'll reveal what I'm talking about in a second. Before I do, sorry, I should backtrack a little bit. I'm Andy. You probably know me at this stage. If you're a regular, if not, thank you for tuning in and hit the subscribe and like button if you don't mind. It means more to us than you think. So I often start my talks on this particular topic by saying, if there was something you could do that you knew would reduce statistically very robust outcomes showing that it likely will reduce your risk of heart disease by 50%, your chance of dying from cancer by about 45%, 50%, and chances of all-cause mortality by 40%, would you do it? And the answer would be, for most people, you would think an unequivocal yes, as long as it doesn't take a crazy amount of effort or some incredible expense. Well, actually, there is something you can do, and I'm going to tell you what that is. It is take a sauna 3 times a week for 20 minutes or more. Believe it or not, will reduce your risk of heart disease by 50%. Now, the reason I'm emphasizing 50 is when it comes to health, incremental improvements, tiny little improvements are celebrated over the top of the pharmaceutical industry. So what I mean by that is if you could show that there was a drug you can take, not talking about statins, maybe I am, but that even reduced your risk of heart disease by 2%, they would be sold everywhere. You'd be, we would be saying to put them in the water supply. I wouldn't, but the pharmaceutical industry would be saying everybody should be taken. They're amazing. They reduce your risk of heart disease, which, by the way, we're not too sure they do in light of recent literature. This is 50%, 50. That's more than exercising, believe it or not, which is a crazy thing to say. Because you think, well, I thought the sauna was just getting in and getting warm and getting relaxed. And how in the name of God would that reduce my risk of heart disease and cancer and dementia and all these things? Well, actually, it shares a lot of mechanisms with exercise. It's what they call an exercise mimetic. It kind of mimics exercise. Now, this is really great because if you're in any way injured or have injuries or poor knees, or if you're, God forbid, you can't actually exercise at all because you're wheelchair bound, or worse, this means that there's a way that you can mimic exercise and keep yourself quote unquote fit, actually, from a cardiovascular and respiratory point of view, without actually doing the exercise itself. So let's just share a couple of slides here. I'll share my screen actually because my slide is acting up for whatever reason. 1 second. So, okay. So this is the study I'm talking about. This is a study that was referred to as the Finnish heart study or the Finland heart study. So if you type in Finland sauna heart study, if you do want to read it for yourself, but I'm going to break it down for you and just explain what the ins and outs of it mean. This was basically a 20 year-long study where they looked at 2,500 middle-aged Finnish men between the age of 42 and 60. Now, what it showed was that people who took a sauna 2 to 3 times per week had a reduced risk of having heart disease of about 40%. If you had a sauna 4 or more, up to 7 times per week, which is actually quite common in Finland, believe it or not. I think I heard a quote somewhere. It's something along the lines of having a sauna is you're about as likely to have a sauna in your house as have a toilet in Finland. It's just the done thing. Everyone has a sauna in their house, and taking a sauna 3 or 4 times a week is just the done thing. It's just what you do over there. So it's part of the culture. So it was the perfect place for the study. If you had a sauna 4 or more times per week, you had a 60% reduced risk of heart disease. So let's take a look at the findings of this study. Now, where I want you to look on this is not at the graphs up top, because they don't really mean a whole lot. They're just talking about the cumulative hazard, and they're difficult to read. But if you look at the box down the bottom in the kind of darker background, so you'll see sudden cardiac death, fatal coronary heart disease, fatal cardiovascular disease, and all-cause mortality. And then if you look 1 time per week was the kind of the reference or the baseline. That's 1 sauna per week, because that's what the control group were doing. 2 to 3 times per week. If you look in the first category, your risk was 0.7, meaning that there was a 29% reduced risk of sudden cardiac death. Across to the next one, 29% reduced risk of fatal coronary heart disease, which is just heart disease. Fatal cardiovascular disease, there was a 32% reduced risk, and 31% reduced risk of all-cause mortality. Now, that's a mad one, but all-cause mortality here includes everything. So your chances of dying from cancer, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, autoimmune conditions, you name it, diabetes, everything was 31% lower if you were having a sauna 2 to 3 times per week. So the number I'm referring to there is 0.69. So 31% lower, because 69, take it away from 100, basically. 31% reduced risk. Now, if you had a sauna 4 to 7 times per week, your chance of heart disease was reduced by 51%. Your chance of fatal coronary heart disease, 40%. Fatal cardiovascular disease, more heart conditions, 45% reduced. And all-cause mortality, almost 40%. I mean, that is absolutely huge, off the charts. Now, in order to understand why, we have to understand one principle, and that principle is known as hormesis. Now, the reason I'm introducing this principle is, if you talk to your average person, they'll say to you, well, saunas can't be good for you, or not can't be good for you, but most people will say, well, I would have assumed that saunas aren't good for you because they increase your heart rate and you find it difficult to breathe and they're uncomfortable and your blood pressure goes up, which is true, and they dehydrate you, which is true. All of these statements are true. But acute stress, acute meaning short periods at a high intensity, acute stress is extremely good for the human body. Acute stress being different to chronic stress. So I'll give you another really good example of acute stress, which causes your heart rate to go up and you to breathe difficultly, and your bones and your muscles to ache and things to get torn and broken, and that being extremely good for you. Strenuous exercise. So your heart rate going up and your blood pressure going up, tears in the muscle, they're not necessarily bad things. If you were to do that on a chronic basis, that would be bad for you. So let me give you an example. If you train and you run a 5K 3 times a week, great. That's a stressor. That's acute. That is going to cause your body to have an adaptive response to that, and that's known as hormesis. So hormesis is there's a hormetic region. So basically, there's a beneficial dose. So that 3 times per week, that's a beneficial dose. You're going to get stronger from that. If you were to, for some mad reason, say, I'm going to run for 10 hours straight every day and never take a break, even though 10 hours a day in its own without a break would kill you eventually, that would be a toxic dose. That would put you at risk. You'd start having heart failure, kidney failure, dehydration. The list goes on. So the dose of the stressor is important, but small doses of something that in the short term is a stressor can be really, really good for you. And we see this with the sauna. So if we look at the sauna, what actually happens is your core body temperature goes up, your heart beats harder, there's increased cardiac output, your stroke volume, your blood pressure, all these things go up, your heart rate goes up. And what's actually happening behind the scenes as well is your plasma volume goes up, your blood flow to the heart increases, your endothelial cell function, which is that's endothelial cells are just what line your blood vessels, they go up. So everything goes up, but there's way more pressure on the body. But your body's hermetic response to this is to say, we need to get better at dealing with this. And what actually happens is the sauna is acting like an exercise mimetic. So an exercise mimetic just means it mimics exercise. So when it mimics exercise, you get a lot of the same physiological responses that you would to exercise. And there's some fascinating research that shows that if you take 2 groups, you get them both doing like a 5K walk 3 times a week. And at the 4-week mark, you get one of the groups, let's call them group number 2, you get them just to do the sauna for the same amount of time. So 3 times a week for half an hour instead of walking the 5K or 40 minutes or whatever it is. And they get almost identical results in terms of fitness, which is amazing. So basically, it's mimicking exercise. So whether you're walking fast or running and your heart rate is up at 150 and you're sweating, or you're in the sauna sitting down, relaxing, but you're sweating and your heart rate is up at 150, they're very similar things that are happening to the body, which is amazing. Because I know I'd rather be sitting in the sauna. And there's a lot of athletes actually will do this to to build on their aerobic training. They'll push themselves for as long as they can in an aerobic capacity. So train for an hour and a half, and then get into the sauna for half an hour as well. So what's going on in the body that's eliciting all these benefits and making people live longer? Well, your cholesterol goes down. Really interesting for people who have cholesterol issues. I'm personally not all that bothered about total cholesterol, but certainly your HDL cholesterol, your good cholesterol, high density lipoprotein, goes up. Inflammation goes down, and inflammation is measured by a marker known as CRP, which is C-reactive protein, and homocysteine is another one. That goes down. Your reactive oxygen species go down as well. When they're high, there's a lot of inflammation, a lot of damage in the body, so that's a good thing. And then you see blood vessels basically getting more flexible. So you see a decrease in arterial stiffness, an increase in arterial compliance. So obviously stiffness is a bad thing, because if you have stiff arteries, your heart has to beat much harder to get the same volume of blood through it. Arterial compliance means the artery is just complying with the volume of blood coming through, so expanding and so on. You'll also see an increase in cardiorespiratory function, which, if you know your terms, basically means fitness for all intents and purposes. Your immune system ramps way up. Endothelial function, again, is to do with blood vessels and blood pressure. And then your blood pressure drops as well. So this looks very like what you see with exercise, actually. So a lot of shared mechanisms as well. So, and I'll finish on this slide. I just wanted to do a quick one tonight. I came across all this research. If you're interested in it, by the way, there's a brilliant researcher who has lots of videos on YouTube called Dr. Rhonda Patrick, Rhonda Patrick, Patrick. So Rhonda Patrick, Rhonda. She's absolutely brilliant. And I learned a ton from listening to her talks, actually, and her seminars on sauna therapy and also cold shock therapy. So let's look at what all these benefits or all these physiological things come together and what results they produce. So again, if you use the sauna 4+ times per week, now I know that's a lot if you're in a gym, but if you have, I have a sauna downstairs. We got one, actually, when this kind of research first came up, we got them. They're really good for brain function as well. And we were kind of treating a neurological issue with my son. And it made a big difference, actually. But so that's why we have one. So I would have used it, still use it a couple of times a week. I would have used it 3 or 4 times a week in kind of spells. But like everything, you kind of forget about it and go through phases. But if you use the sauna 4 times a week for at least 15 minutes, and that's the number, by the way, let me just refer to this in the paper. If you look top right here, you'll see 11 minutes, 11 to 19, and 18 minutes. And basically, 19 minutes is the kind of sweet spot. And then oh, apologies. Sorry, guys. I actually muted my mic and forgot to unmute it. So if you go 3 times a week, you're 4 times a week, 65% less likely to suffer a stroke in your brain. 65% less likely. Unbelievable figure for something that takes little or no effort and is relaxing. You're 51% less likely to die from cardiovascular disease. Less likely to have cardiovascular death is a strange way to phrase that, but this is from a paper. And also, it will benefit you if you have asthma, COPD, or chronic pulmonary disease and pneumonia. So there's no doubt that there is a huge range of benefits from using the sauna. Okay, so wanted to change gears and do something a little bit different tonight. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'm just going to answer a question here. Hi, Marguerite. Why are sea salt and Himalayan salt recommended over table salt? Are they not all sodium, Marguerite? Yes, they're all sodium, but the Himalayan and rock salt would be purer. So the ones that you get, the iodized table salt, the normal kind of pouring salt that you get in chippers and stuff like that you can buy in the plastic container or any of those other salts, tend to have a lot of plastic contaminants in them as well. So they're not really pure. So you're much better off with the Himalayan rock salt. Also, because they're pure, there tends to be better levels of things like magnesium, a pure form of sodium which the body can absorb, better calcium and so on. So trace minerals are much higher because they're real. So less chemicals, much better for you. So guys, I hope you enjoyed that. Wanted to kind of change it up a little bit and do something a little bit different. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you again soon. Take care. Bye-bye.